Good evening, my friends. Welcome back. It has been a long time between drinks, but finally, the Cyber People podcast, thanks to Latitude Live, is back on the scene. This is season 2, episode 3, and we are delighted this evening to welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. Leonard, aka Len Kleinman. Len, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. A few technical glitches getting set up this evening, but you continued smiling all the way through. Ever the consummate professional. Thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me for this great opportunity, Will. Appreciate it.
The pleasure is all ours. So, Len, look, I could tell everyone who you are, but I think it would be better if it came from the horse's mouth. So, Len, who are you?
Who am I? Okay, in the context of our event this evening, I suppose I sum it up. I'm just a long time paranoid cyber geek, I guess, in some ways. Been playing in the IT and cybersecurity space for over 30 plus years. A lot of it in the public sector side, believe it or not. I tend to describe myself as a bit of a career public servant. I only flipped to the other side about 7 years ago. Until then, a combination of state and federal government, and as I like to say, almost 16 plus years with everyone's favourite federal government agency, the Australian Tax Office.
Boo, boo. Nah, just kidding. Make friends with the tax man. The tax man, there's two certainties in life, death and taxes, Len.
It's one of the certainties in life, right? Along with data breaches, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I do like to moonlight in the sense that I got a couple of side hustles, as I like to describe it. I'm the branch exec or branch chair for our industry association in Canberra, the Australian Information Security Association. I also sit on the advisory board for the Oceania Cybersecurity Centre. I'm also part of the Forbes Technology Council, and I do also have been very, very fortunate as a appointee for Deakin University as an adjunct professor there as well. The way I like to describe it, all those side hustles are a way for myself to be able to give back to the community, to the cybersecurity industry that has been really, really, really good to me. And I encourage all my friends and colleagues who've had that similar good fortune, find a way to give back. So anyway, there you go.
No, that's a brilliant summation. I definitely couldn't have done it nearly as well as you did just then. Now, the way that you talk about your career, you wear multiple hats, and that seems to be an emerging trend. People, rather than having careers, they seem to have a portfolio of jobs, and that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you have a portfolio of jobs, which definitely makes life a lot more interesting. Also, you mentioned that you were a paranoid cyber geek. Now, I have to ask this. Is a certain level of paranoia a prerequisite for success in the cyber industry? Is it a case of you don't have to be paranoid to work here, but it definitely helps?
I guess you could say yes. I mean, personally, from my point of view, it's more of a mindset type thing. When I say paranoid, it's always a case of having that inquisitive mindset where you're always sort of looking at different tools and technologies and different systems and different scenarios, and just sort of asking those little pricky sort of questions like, just where's my data going when it's being used or collected in this way, shape, or form? Do I trust this particular piece of technology just because it's a household name? Things like that. That's kind of what I mean in terms of being a bit of a paranoid cyber geek in that sense. It's about just that mindset, of how you view our digital tools and technology that are a big part of our digital lives.
Absolutely. So a healthy amount of skepticism is definitely a useful attribute. And do you find that when it comes to those sorts of things, your axiomatic point of departure is a position of mistrust? and you want to review the data and the facts to be persuaded otherwise? Is that a useful place to start? I'm going to mistrust this technology until sort of like a
Yeah.
guilty until proven innocent perspective.
To some degree, yeah. But I also have to acknowledge that it's not necessarily the technology itself that is um, untrustworthy. It's also the people or the institution that is responsible for it, how they deploy and use it, and what happens, in terms of how they use the technology and what they collect and so forth. So it's not just purely the tech itself. It's about looking at holistically in terms of that whole system, the whole service, if you want. Uh, it's interesting because it does make you sort of think about different sort of things. Simple example. We used to have TVs. Were pretty sort of common nowadays. Now it's interesting to see that TV sitting on the wall has all this incredible functionality in there that allows it to listen in, potentially profile your usage, your consumption, and things like that. And you go, okay, that's kind of cool when you look at the useful side of it. But what else may it also do that is, unintended consequences of that technology? That when you start thinking about it that way, makes for an interesting sort of conversation, put it that way.
Absolutely. So TVs are now in the world of IoT, right? The Internet of Things.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
are we being? I guess Edward Snowden put a bit of a spanner in the works, didn't he, when he revealed that our our technology was being used as a form of espionage.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, it's
I've opened a can of worms there. Sorry
Oh
for
no,
that, but
I suppose the simple sort of answer to that sort of scenario is that any tool, call it a TV, a car or whatever, in the hands of an individual can be put to good and bad. Put it that way. So it's not necessarily the TV in this case that's bad in that sense. It's just like any other tool. Yeah, it's how it actually is put into practice, how it's utilized. It can be for good and bad, equally so.
absolutely, guns don't kill people, rappers do. So, Len, how do you? I mean, look, one of the common topics that resurfaces again and again as I go about my day to day is um, burnout in cyber. Now, you listed
hmm
probably close to 10 different professional hats that you wear. How do you manage to fit all of that in to a regular life and still
It's a really good
look,
question.
youthful and energetic and happy and healthy? How do you balance all of that?
It comes back to what I said earlier. I think first and foremost, I just think that as far as cyber goes, as a career, as an industry, as a vocational choice, it's just incredible. It is extremely attractive as an industry. It's constantly evolving. All these different new challenges and things like that that come along. It keeps the job really sort of interesting in that sense. So when you kind of look at that, I kind of draw a lot of energy from the people that I get to engage with, whether it's within my own organization or externally, or just right across the community. Um, there are a lot of incredible people out there doing some really, really incredible work. And I'm not just talking about the importance of the work there. There's some really ingenious people who tackle the whole cyber paradigm in different ways, thinking different ways, and therefore you're constantly sort of learning, and that just juices me in that sense.
No, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And that was the inspiration for actually beginning this podcast in the first place. It is the Cyber People podcast for that very reason.
Oh, of course.
The people that I would come across in the industry were just breathtakingly fascinating. Yeah, and they were so diverse, like snowflakes.
Yeah.
there's no two snowflakes that are the same. And that's really what inspired me to do this podcast. I wanted to showcase these people, to promote them within the industry, but also as an example to people who are on the outside looking in and thinking about cyber as a possible career path. And that is a nice segue into my next question.
Yeah.
Len, your passion for this industry is clear. How did you end up doing this? You know, were you a child who thought, what I really be when I grow up is a cyber person? They probably weren't calling them that in those days, but how did you end up where you are today? If you wouldn't mind giving us a little
Sure.
walk through your life history, and then we'll get on to the juicy topics we were discussing earlier today.
Fabulous. No. Certainly, I guess you could call me a bit more of a traditional approach in terms of how I landed into cyber. My undergrad and back from my early days, I always liked tinkering around with computers and coding and developing things. The creative aspect there was always a really cool attraction. Not to mention the way you could bring a novel way to solving problems. There are so many different ways that you can actually code to achieve the same result. And I remember we used to always have bake-offs with a lot of friends and colleagues in those early days as to who could actually achieve the same process to get the outcome with the least number of lines of code. And that was, your kung fu's better than the other,
Yeah.
So my background, obviously, I came in as a developer. I was an Oracle case engineer for quite a few years, back in the 90s there. So my bent was from that traditional sense in terms of a developer, a coder, and then I found myself getting more involved in the security side of things, from authentication, authorization. Then we started playing with encryption and subversions of systems and things like that. And that was like, wow, okay, this is really kind of cool and funky. This is different,
Yeah.
Taking a system and making it do things that it was not intended to do, but yet you could make it do, bending systems and stuff like that. So it was just different in that sense, and that's how I found myself getting more and more into the cyber side of things. Back then, the organization I was with, as I mentioned, the tax office, was really embarking on this whole journey of adopting digital technologies and the web and portals and all that sort of stuff like that. So it was like a brave new world in that sense. So getting that opportunity at that early stage to be involved in a lot of those new, somewhat ground-breaking type initiatives and projects, I guess the timing was right. Fell into it. Loved all the cyber side of things, or as it was back then, information security. And now it's
so boring. Cyber's way sexier, funky. I think you used the word funky earlier. Cyberpunk. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yep.
Good marketing.
There's a lot of that in this space. Put it that way.
What's very interesting to me, listening to you talk about your days in the tax office, Len, is that you talk about it as though the ATO was a place of disruption and innovation. And that's, pushing the boundaries, doing new things, the latest technology, the latest tools. I think that for your average person in the street, that would come as quite a surprise, because we think of taxes as being kind of, a little bit
dry,
old fashioned, a bit dry, a bit boring, but it's not the case. And I guess that makes sense, because if you are the ATO or any tax organization, you're going to be a massive target, which means that you have to be one step ahead constantly.
Yeah.
And that requires a staggering amount of innovation. It requires hiring the best people, big budgets. Am I right? Was that your experience?
A lot of it is. I wouldn't say it was big budgets. You had to be smart,
creative,
in terms of how you extract the most out of your budget.
Yeah.
But definitely, in my experience going through that transformation that the tax office went through, we had some incredible leadership there who saw the value in cybersecurity and what cybersecurity brought to the organization and being a differentiator. Um, I had a lot of support also in building a team of incredible cyber practitioners, and we all still stay in touch. The unfortunate part is things change, empires rise and fall, and the team, or the majority of the team I built, have since left. But we still keep in touch. We still, in fact, a large portion of my own old team still work together under one of my old team leads who has his own organization now, which is just fabulous. To see these people who I brought in from grads, who were very nascent in cyber, and they've grown into incredible practitioners. Some have their own companies, others are working overseas, leading cyber for their organization. It's From my point of view as the senior director for that team back then, it's just a fantastic feeling to see them just excel there. But yeah, the organization was very much at the leading edge when it came to cyber. And in the end, when you think about it, the tax office, you're talking about the single organization that underpins the revenue for this country, and therefore so many of the services that all of the citizens rely on. It's pretty significant and important role that we had.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you, this is a very good segue actually, because I really want to dig into the whole, excuse me, professionalization of the industry, nurturing talent,
Right.
and how you build a successful team, where you start. And excuse me, I've been talking to some interesting people this week,
Yeah.
excuse me, who've been talking about build a dream team, and you try and bring that
Yeah.
dream team along on the journey for you. Let's talk about that, Len. So
Sure.
I think a lot of people are really thinking about how you build a successful cyber team.
Okay.
Where do you start? If you could just talk me through it, what's your blueprint? A lot of people who are listening to this hopefully will be thinking, how do
Yeah.
I build a great team?
Uh,
Talk me through it, Len. What's your process?
I suppose that there's a couple of fundamental steps that come into play here. Starting first and foremost, uh, we were pretty clear in terms of what we wanted in terms of the capabilities in the team. So the fundamentals that we anchored on was starting with some of the basics. Okay, we needed to build the right type of job description. We needed to be clear in terms of the selection criteria, and of course, we wanted to have a good set of questions that help to tease out the right candidates. So, you're talking about basic sort of platforms there. Uh, when it came to things like the interviews, we found what was really effective in ensuring that we got the right people was taking a very sort of holistic approach to hiring. And it is a concept, believe it or not, holistic hiring. So we're looking at the person in totality. So we're not just looking at the skills or qualifications that they've managed to acquire or garner. We also wanted to be able to get a little bit of an insight into the individual's mindset. Some of their social factors that came into play, their moral compass, and things like that. So we found that using open-ended questions, scenario-based questions, allowed you to actually tease that out of people. And quite frankly, because there were scenario questions, you could push the boundaries. Like you could pose a scenario for someone who's coming to the team. Okay, you're now, for example, on call, you're leading incident response, and this is the scenario that you deal with. And part of that, you could actually weave in a situation that requires them to actually demonstrate how they exercise their moral compass. Where's that boundary and things like that. And that gives you a bit more insight beyond just the raw skills or the raw degrees or certifications that they have. You start to get insight into that individual, and that helps a long way to also establishing cultural fit. Now I know cultural fit is pretty sort of loose there. It does involve a little bit of gut feel as you're sort of talking to the individual and their answering these different sort of scenario and questions and dealing with the different curveballs that you throw them. But it does allow us to tease out what I like to call a higher quality candidate. And
Okay.
we were very successful over those years. Yeah, we built a really, really good team of high quality candidates. Um, and I think it's demonstrated if you go and look at my LinkedIn posting, my photo on that front page of me there is a very, very proud director then at the tax office, alongside all the different awards that team won, both locally, nationally, and at international events. And to me, that just sort of was the punctuation in terms of the quality that we brought into the organization, was second to none there.
You just if there's any listeners who are just tuning in now, I just wanted to draw their attention. If you just with reference to Len's last comment about LinkedIn, Leonard Kleinman, LinkedIn, Palo Alto, Leonard Kleinman, Palo Alto, Kleinman, Kleiman. Check him out. Sorry, please continue.
No, not a problem at all. Um, Obviously, as I said, yeah, I'm quite a strong advocate of a good tertiary sort of education as well. So most of the, I'm thinking back, making sure I say this accurately. Yes, I'm pretty certain that everyone in the team were graduates of some related discipline to technology and IT and things like that. And then what we did over that is we overlaid the relevant industry certifications and that model worked for us really, really well. We knew that if someone came in with that tertiary qualification, at a minimum, they displayed tenacity, commitment, resilience to seeing through what is a significant period of study and so forth. But secondly, we also knew that they came in with the fundamentals in terms of what is the building blocks of technology and security. They understand what the OSI layers are. They understood how the three-way handshake works. They got coding fundamentals. As I said earlier, coding seems to be something that's falling by the wayside, but yet it underpins just about everything that we use and consume in our digital society. You mentioned the TV, that's got coding embedded in there. Hardware these days is coding in there. The apps we use have got coding. So that was kind of like in broad strokes the fundamental approach that we undertook. And then it was the industry certifications, the certifications that were relevant for our role in the context of our organization. So I would then undertake a commitment to them when they joined us, that I would invest in them. And in doing so, they had clear line of sight of a career path. So they could come as a graduate, and over time, through experience, exposure, training, and investing that we do into the individual, they could see a clear line of sight in terms of progressing their career. And that made a huge difference for a lot of them. That they could see where they could grow and excel as an individual.
Len, just to go back to the moral compass question, one thing I've noticed about the majority of the cyber people with whom I interact is that most of them, and I was discussing this with a peer in the industry last week, most of them are motivated by a genuine desire to protect people. Yes. That's been my experience. Yes. And I find that hugely impressive. It's noble. It's, and I think that's probably why so many people from careers like the armed forces, the police, protective industries find their way into cyber, because it's an opportunity to continue along that path at scale.
Yeah, it's a good way.
Which I think is a hugely attractive element of a career in cybersecurity.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And if I may, at this point, you've made me sort of think and reflect back on the flip side. And where I'm going with this is, yes, these are people who are absolutely committed in terms of, protecting our digital way of lives. Okay, as a summary. And what I don't, or what I find a little sort of disconcerting is um, the sensationalization that happens when an organization experiences some kind of an incident of some sort. And when you think about it, behind the sensationalization of all those headlines, um, there are millions of individual stories that are associated, behind those headline grabbing reports when something bad has happened, and it's on both sides. There's real people who are going to be materially impacted by those incidents, those breaches. But to our point that led into this, there's also real people there who are working tirelessly away at trying to secure our systems, trying to secure uh, our organizations and things like that. And the sensationalization that happens through the media and broadcasting when these things happen, I think, kind of like diminishes that to a large degree. They use all those incredible figures, hooded individuals hunched over keyboards, matrix images and what have you. And to
Yeah.
me, that just it
It,
detracts, from the reality of what it really is all about. It dehumanizes a lot of what we're doing on the good side, and dehumanizes the impact on individuals who are, facing now, or what do they do with their personal data out there and things like that. So there's two kind of sides there, I think, when it comes to the people side of it there, if you want.
Absolutely. It not only detracts from what you just mentioned, but it also serves to increase the FUD, the
Yeah.
fear, the uncertainty, and the doubt,
Mm.
which is very unhelpful.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we have that expression, don't we, in media? If it bleeds, it reads. So the conventional media is desperately trying to compete for the most valuable commodity on the planet, which is attention.
Yes.
And the way in which they do that is by using these hoodied bad guys surrounded by all the matrix codification, you know.
Very true.
Um, but no, that is very true. So um, let's now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to
Mm.
loop back to
Yes.
before we talk a little bit more about talent and so forth within the cyber industry. You mentioned certifications. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would like to know from a gentleman such as yourself, a seasoned veteran in the industry, what are the most useful certifications? What do you look for from a certification qualification
Oh,
perspective? Because I think, like, if
yeah.
you don't have the industry experience, that's something that's open to everyone, right? If you have the inclination and the means,
Yeah.
you can study something, you can do a certification. So what advice would you give people about where to start and what the most useful certifications are in cybersecurity?
Wow. That's got to be the most common question that I get year in, year out. No doubt about that one. Um, Look, as I started to sort of allude to earlier, I think that it doesn't, put it this way, whatever course of education that you undertake, whatever course of certification that you undertake, you will always learn something new out of it. That's a great takeaway. Put it that way. All right. Um, but if you're asking me about, which particular one is the best, I don't think that's a simple answer to that, because it really depends on the type of role that you want to be able to gravitate to within cyber. It also depends on the organization that you're working for as well. They will influence the nature of some of those particular industry certifications that you may undertake there. Um, for me, because the team that I was building at the time was very much a technical focus capability team. So you're talking about the penetration testers, the red teamers, the incident responders. We obviously looked for certifications that were within those swim lanes. So you're looking at OSCP as a certification, or the relevant SANS type training courses and things like that. So it's not a case of which is the best, which is one that any individual should do. It really needs to be looked in the context of the individual and where they are headed in terms of their particular vocational choice within cybersecurity.
Okay. All right. No, that makes sense. The appropriate tool for the appropriate job.
Certainly.
Um, okay. No, that makes sense. So let's talk about talent and what you see as the greatest challenges on the talent side of things and how that
Yeah.
evolves into leadership, what the challenges are and what you see as the solutions. Would you be able to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Excuse me, once again.
No problem. Uh, there's clearly no doubt that we are, as an industry, operating in a talent deficit. It doesn't matter which report you pick up. Cybersecurity Ventures has a really good report, and they identify some 3.5 million shortage globally. I think ISC Squared, so Cybersecurity Workforce Report, one of my favorite ones, they tell us we're somewhere about 3.4 plus million shortage, things like that. Um,
Wow.
it's that is clear, no doubt about it, in terms of the talent problem that we are facing. Um, I think one of the challenges that we have in cyber is that it's not like you can just turn a tap on and then that pipeline flows and out comes capable, qualified people in there. So I think for a lot of organizations who are experiencing this pain, they need to start looking at different mechanisms and how they actually can bring in talent. There's a traditional way, like I described myself and how we kind of did our recruitment with the tax office. That's still absolutely sort of valid. But there are other ways you can also look at tapping talent in terms of that other areas or other sectors of industry that you may not have thought of approaching. Could be an avenue. You could go direct to universities, have some kind of a relationship with tertiary education with your organization. And maybe it could be that you offer internships, become available through those partnerships with these different educational institutions. That could be another opportunity. Organizations could align themselves with mentorship programs with organizations that specialize in terms of connecting graduates with organizations through mentorship programs and things like that. That's another way that we could actually look at that. But the talent challenge that we have that I think we acknowledge we haven't fully sort of addressed is how do we actually enable people to effectively do a mid-career change. So you're talking about people who have spent, say, 10, 15 years working in other lines of vocation, and then they, for whatever reason, they decide that they've had enough there and they want to explore other opportunities. As I said, we acknowledge that there's an incredible talent pool sitting there, but we haven't figured it out as a industry in cybersecurity, how we actually allow those people to easily matriculate into cyber. And that's a challenge that I think we're still continuing to grapple with and unfold. But there is a talent pool that is dying to be able to come in, and they bring some incredible life skills, real tacit work skills, because they're really going to have that experience. How do we help them transition that? And there are some organizations that are looking at implementing a certain type of tertiary courses that allow them to do bridging type courses and be able to come in. But I also think that from the individual perspective, there needs to be a bit of an honest conversation. They're not going to matriculate from a senior role in another industry and then all of a sudden just get that opportunity in cyber. They need to be able to accept the fact that they're probably going to have to take a couple of steps backwards and rebuild their career. Not that they can't, they certainly can. But just to think you're going to pop, from one level in another vocation into another, it's probably a little unrealistic there.
Yeah, so it's very often you have the right people on the bus. You just have to move them from the seat they're currently into a cyber seat.
Yeah, yeah, and that is a challenge that they were struggling with. That system that I talked about, how we did it back in my tax office days, that was predicated on tapping new graduated talent, if you want, and that worked for us. Yeah, we had that ability to bring a couple of good grads in. As I said, I went for quality over quantity. I found that having a couple of really good people, I could get infinite more productivity out of two good people than I could out of 10 kind of like middle of the road type individuals, put it that way. But that was a
Absolutely.
strategy that we used then, and it worked incredibly well for us then.
So the grads that you selected for the team,
Mhm.
they were people that you brought into the ATO. They were not people that were already in, that you approached and said, "Look, we've had a look at your profile and we think you'd actually be great for the cyber team," or was it a little bit of
It's a
a
bit of
mix
both.
of both?
It's a bit of both. Yeah, we'd advertise externally so we could get people coming by that channel. But within the organization itself, the organization was great. They had a graduate program, where they'd bring grads in across all of the organization. So I'm not talking just cyber. And then we'd have people who pass through the ICT part of their tenure during that graduate program, and we get an opportunity to bring them in. They'd spend 6 months with the team, things like that. So it gave them an opportunity to experience us. It gives us an opportunity to experience what they were like without having to 100% commit. And if at the end of that period, we found that we got a couple of real nuggets of gold there, we'd find a way to bring them in on a permanent basis.
I'm a massive cinephile, and I can't resist a cinematic analogy or reference from time to time. Listening to you speak reminds me of Kevin Costner in The Untouchables when he's recruiting his team to bring down Al Capone. He realizes that most of the cops in Chicago are bent, so the only way for him to build a team is to go straight to the tree and recruit from a source. Have you always favored that approach, Len, or have you had positive experiences where you've hired, at least on paper, experienced exponents of the cyber
Yeah,
industry who've worked out? Or is it, I get the feeling that you're someone who really likes to, you're a big fan of homegrown talent.
I am, but I have to admit we have also picked up during those recruitment processes some really good people who are in train in their career. Um, I think the differential when it came to those people is that they demonstrated their capabilities through the recruitment and the interview process, and and this is a big one. We also used a lot of word of mouth. Cyber is a very small community, especially when you're talking about in Canberra. Uh, so the word of mouth community is extremely strong, especially when it comes to the practitioner side. You could ask around a few people and say, "Hey, do you know Joe Bloggs there?" And you'd be surprised. Most times you'd ask one person they know, let alone two. And the word of mouth played a reasonably strong part in that one because you got to have um, the insight into those people from others who they worked and engaged with, and you get to understand again, like I said, a little bit more on their moral mindset, and things like that. So yeah, word of mouth was a big part of how we actually brought and got that quality of talent into the team.
Absolutely. Word of mouth is by far the most reliable form of accreditation and certification in my experience. Nothing quite like a ringing
Yeah.
third-party endorsement.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
Now, one of the obviously there's a bit of an issue with cyber talent. Demand far outstrips supply. We have a dearth of talent. I think earlier you alluded it to be something around, was it 3.4 million, something
Yeah,
like that?
3.4 to 3.5 million deficit globally.
Wow.
And our region in being part of Asia Pacific here, I think we're somewhere around 2.1 plus million deficit.
Wow. Wow. Now, I heard the other day that we are the most hacked country in the world. Was it you who told me that? Someone told
No,
me
I
that.
don't.
Is
I
that
don't think
true?
it was me. No.
Okay. All right. Now, um, I have a lot of these sorts of conversations with a lot of people. We're often talking about what the solution is. How do we solve this problem? Um,
Wow.
one of the one of the things that some people say is that we are, to a certain degree, a little bit too fussy. We want someone who we want, as we joke in the industry, we say, oh, typical client, they want like a six-legged unicorn. They want, they have a huge wish list of requirements.
Yeah.
And what that does is it creates barriers to entry for people who have incredible aptitude,
Yeah.
but they might not yet have the experience, at least from a quantity perspective. They might not have the quantity of experience, but they might have the quality of experience. But we can be a little bit too stringent on our requirements, and that
Yeah.
is preventing highly talented people with great aptitude
Yeah.
to come into the industry who could actually be incredibly valuable assets for people such as yourself. What's your view on that, and how should we tackle that?
The aptitude side of it was um, absolutely mandatory in terms of our recruitment process. Yeah, my mantra, if you want, for how we went about recruiting and hiring was basically you want to hire for the right attitude, aptitude, then you want to train for competence, and then you want to coach for performance. And that was a simple approach in a nutshell. And then, again, I'll refer back to the recruitment mechanisms. If your recruitment mechanisms from your duty statements and your questionnaires and all the rest of it, if you don't take the time to actually develop them properly, then you're not going to give yourself the best opportunity to be able to identify all those nuggets of gold in the right people. So that's why I said holistic recruitment works really well, because you weren't just looking about that qualification, that certification. You wanted to identify those people with the right attitude and the right aptitude as well. I was always, I don't know, a bit of a hard ass. I always said, I want both in that sense, because I figured if I set the high water mark, I'll get somewhere close to it. If I go and set a low water mark, then okay, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot there. Okay, um, but yeah, when it comes to actually identifying your people who are not going to be more, let's say, conventional in terms of the way to come to our industry, it does come back to you, your team, the way you develop and hone your recruitment mechanisms. And done correctly, you will identify those people with the right attitudes and aptitudes to bring into the play. Because like I said, you could then develop the right a career path and overlay the right training with them. Use a buddy system so that they had someone experienced who was always going to be their go-to person, things like that. There's a whole host of different ways that you can actually ensure that you identify those outliers, if I may call them that, non-traditional.
That is an absolute nugget of wisdom there. If I can just paraphrase what you said, you want to hire someone for their attitude, train them for their aptitude, and coach them for performance.
Yeah, yeah, pretty
Have
much
I
it is.
have I
Okay.
paraphrased it
Yeah.
correctly?
You look, put it this way: I've known people who've built teams, and unfortunately, they've brought a person into the team who has mad skills. But that person also has some very, let's say, strong sort of personalities, bordering on narcissistic tendencies, and does
Wow.
not play well with others.
Yeah.
Uh, the risk that you run when you bring someone like that, irrespective of how incredible their skill set is they so dysfunctional. They're actually like a cancer in terms of your team. They're not worth it. They're really not.
A bad apple.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And they make the stakeholders feel stupid,
Yeah.
which is the last thing we want. We want to put our arms around them and take them along on the journey.
Oh, that is 100% true. Actually, that's a really good point you raised there, because it isn't just about those technical skill sets. We were a technically strong based team, but oh my God, your soft skills. I know some people don't like the term soft and hard skills. Jesus, get over it. We know what we're talking about here. Okay, so yeah, the technical bent, absolutely, but we were looking for the soft skills also, the business acumen, your communication skills, your empathy skills as well. Don't forget, we were a team that delivered the incident response capability 24/7. You needed to have all those consummate skills to be able to execute effectively and efficiently. Yeah. So trust me when I'm
Absolutely.
telling you, it wasn't just those pure hard technical skills. We were looking for a whole host of other soft skills.
Absolutely. No, it's funny when people, I know what you mean. Like soft skills is one of those things that it's almost like I don't know, people sort of get funny around it. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know. Words have got such power over us.
True.
Sometimes I think we need to reframe things. We give them far too much power.
Yeah.
We're so sensitive. Um, well, listen, Leonard, I could talk to you. Len, I could talk to you all night. You're a fascinating guy. You've got so much to offer. You've got such a wealth of experience. I hope that after hearing this, people will go and check you out. If they want to learn a little bit more about you, where should they go? What should they do if they want to learn more about Mr. Kleinman and what he has to offer?
Oh, look, I think as you hit on it earlier, the LinkedIn page is probably the easiest. Drop me a message if you want to explore any of these things further. Whether it's the talent issue, the leadership issue, because quite frankly, that's something that I think is really concerning, because people say, oh, to me, what is your take? What's the biggest challenge or problem you think about in cyber? And I don't really see things like ransomware and all the rest of it. I mean, not to play it down, that's a problem. I actually see that the biggest issue I see from the practitioner side of it, and I'm not the only one, is the quality of leadership that we have in cybersecurity these days. It really worries me. There's a growing chasm between the practitioner and then someone with a title. Yeah. And that to me, I think, has got to change at some point in the future. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know where we're going to be in this industry if we don't actually look at how we actually start to improve that quality of leadership that we have there.
Well, listen, I was hoping we could cover that off this evening, but I know that your family will want to see you tonight. You're a very hardworking man. It's now 7:38 p.m.
No problem.
So would you be against the idea of us tabling that discussion for
Oh,
part 2 of the Cyber People podcast with Len Kleinman?
love.
Because we could do a whole series on that.
Oh, look,
We really
I
could.
would absolutely love to. It would be an absolute pleasure from that point of view. Yes, please count me in.
Leonard, you're an absolutely generous man. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we can do it again soon. Have yourself a splendid evening.
Will do. Take care.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bob.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.